Good morning to those who are joining us. We're just waiting to get started with our panel session today. Good morning to all of those that are joining us now. We'll be starting at 11 a.m. Right, and good morning, everybody. I am Annabelle, Membership and Events Manager at Agri-EPI Centre. So I'm just here to welcome you to the panel session today and to go through a few housekeeping rules. It's great to see so many members and non-members on the call today. So just to let you know, as attendees, you'll be on mute for the session, but please keep in touch with us via the chat function as we go and submit questions as we go. The questions will be taken at the end, and if you have a question for a particular panelist, please put their name next to it as well. The sessions will be recorded, so please enjoy. I'm now going to hand over to Agri-EPI CEO Dave Ross to welcome the session. So Dave provides leadership and strategic direction to the development of Agri-EPI Centre and its emerging role, both nationally and internationally. He is a trained engineer with 20 years experience of agri-technology in both the cropping and livestock sectors. He's been involved in the R&D of a number of novel and patented developments across the agri-tech sector. So Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Annabelle, and welcome everybody. I welcome you to a series of webinars, of which this is really interesting webinar to participate in. And I just wanted to provide a quick backdrop to Agri-EPI Centre. For those of you who don't know us, we're one of 4 agri-tech centres funded or co-funded through the UK government. And you can see the branding behind me ensures that we are working together to develop solutions for the industry. Now, we do this from an Agri-EPI Centre point of view. We do this largely through our membership network, our project work, our support on funding, our R&D, our trialling technology on farm. And you can see on the next slide our key collaborators. And if you would like more information on our membership network, etc., please get directly in touch with Annabelle. Now back to today. We'll be looking at a host of challenges today along the innovation journey. And it really includes a disconnect between, or a perceived disconnect between technology developers, farmers, supply chain, and difficulties in companies finding the right business models and return on investment for their products. There's regulatory issues, there's skill gaps, there's challenges with product testing in seasonal farming environments. So today, we're delighted to be joined by one of our members, Sajith Wimalaratne, Head of Automation and Autonomy at Cambridge Consultants, to facilitate this webinar. Cambridge Consultants help design, develop, and bring to market breakthrough products for clients around the world and in various market sectors, including the agri sector. Over to you, Saj. And I'm not risking the name twice. If you, I'll run with Saj from now on.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. That was very good pronunciation, mind you. Thank you very much. And a warm welcome from me to everyone who's joining in today. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I've been looking forward to hosting this event because it's an interesting topic to talk about. Plus, given the time and the unprecedented environment we're living in at the moment. So I've been looking forward to that. So thank you very much. The first item on the agenda today is for the introduction of this wonderful panel we've got. Dave, I'm gonna skip you because we've already heard what you do, but only to say that you're representing the Agri-EPI Centre today, someone who's working across in many, facilitating discussions in this space. So thank you for your time. Rob, I'll come to you first. You are the leafy salad crop manager at G's Fresh, and you're representing the end user and the farmer in today's panel.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Saj. Thank you for this opportunity. As Saj just said, I'm representing kind of the end user on the journey of implementing technology into our industry. I'm leafy crop manager for G's and have worked for G's since graduating almost 20 years ago, which is a little bit scary. Now we're responsible for well over 1,000 hectares of lettuce, but more fortunately for me, I'm part of a very innovative company at the forefront of technology in both horticultural sector and agriculture as well, because we obviously have conventional farming alongside our salad and veg businesses. I'm also the British Leafy Salads Association current chairman, and also sit on the AHDB Field Veg panel also. So I've got different sites of the technology journey from a number of different angles, and I hope I can contribute today to this discussion. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. What was the volumes you said again, Rob?
So myself, we look after just over 1,000 hectares. So that's 140 million little lettuces in the summer. But that's just myself here. We've got other growers around the country and also then in Spain as well. So the area is considerably more than that as a group. But myself, I keep myself busy on just over 1,000 hectares.
Oh, that's a lot of lettuces, and I should really be upping my salad consumption in my diet.
Well, that's right. Definitely. Get one of you 5 a day.
Yeah. But it's just carbs and meat taste much better, though. That's the problem.
No comment.
Sorry, I was just joking. Look, Ben, you're next. You're the CEO of the small robot company, and we understand that you've been developing your technology for the last 4 years or so with you and your team. Please tell us about yourself, and you're representing two things. One is the startup community as well as the technology developers today. So please.
Sure. I'm CEO of the Small Robot Company, and we've got a mission to help farmers feed the world while regenerating the planet. We saw about 4 years ago that cereal farmers are in trouble. The century-old system that they use to produce the world's largest crops is getting more expensive, while yields and revenues are flatlined. It's also destroying soils and ecosystems and vulnerable to climate change. So what we thought was needed is a system that's more precise and intelligent, that doesn't damage the soils, that produces more regenerative, organic quality food for less inputs. And we call this the fourth agricultural revolution. So we're delivering farming by understanding and caring for the crop at a per plant level. And we believe in the next 20 years, this will be the only way to farm. So we're building a suite of robots called Tom, Dick, Harry, and guided by Wilma. Tom lives on the farm gathering data on the plants and the environment. Wilma converts this into instructions for Dick and Harry. Dick nurtures and protects the crop. He kills weeds individually with electricity. And Harry precisely plants the crop, giving it the best chance of the highest yields. So we deliver this as a service that farmers pay for without upfront costs or risk of obsolescence. My partner, Sam, is a farmer, and we've designed our service alongside farmers, and they're completely engaged. We have nearly 200 farmers who have signed up and 600 who have invested in us. And these include people like Waitrose and the National Trust. So we built up a team of people from Dyson, DeepMind, JCB, IBM, and Virgin Galactic. And we're starting to deliver our first service now on farms in Hampshire, and we'll be rolling it out gradually over the next 3 or 4 years.
Thank you, Ben. Ben, I have seen your technology in operation in TV and BBC One shows and some various conferences. And there's nothing small about the impact your robots have in the sector. So where did the name come from, Ben?
So when we first started, we saw there was a massive perception problem with the idea of robotics. They were seen as hard, metallic. Most people assume that robots are going to steal your jobs and then kill you. So we realized that if we're going to produce a robotic service, which is something that people can engage in and want to use, we would have to soften that approach. So we developed an experience strategy, which is based around delivering essentially machines that help people. And a big part of that was making sure that our naming and our logo and the way that we approach dealing with the different stakeholders was sort of soft and easy to engage with.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now, there's a great name. Thank you, thank you. Chris, finally to you. You are the head of industrial robotics here at Cambridge Consultants, and I know for you for a fact that you worked a lot of in technologies in agri sector as well as outside agri as well. So please tell us a little bit about you and also who you are representing today.
Yep, so I'm an engineer. My role is generally providing sort of technical leadership on our big multidisciplinary projects involving automation and robotics. So that's sometimes in the agri-tech sector, sometimes in medical devices or industrial factory environments. So yeah, I'm a technical person. I'm actually a physicist originally. I'm an engineer now, but I like knowing a little bit about lots of things. I'm a bit of a generalist. I know lots of different disciplines to a shallow level, and so I think that's important when you're working in a kind of thing like robotics, where it's a mixture of electronics and software. And yet also industrial design and making sure that it actually delivers the service that people want. As Ben said, it's not about being hard and metallic. It's about having to deal with the sort of variation you find in the natural world. I'm representing Cambridge Consultants today.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. And thank you to everybody. So the next item on the agenda is to Chris to give a scene setting presentation to the notion that we are going to be discussing today. So take it away, Chris, please.
Okay, great. Can you see the slides? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I thought I'd give you a quick introduction to Cambridge Consultants and what we do and how we fit into this agri-tech puzzle. So we're an engineering design services company. So we design products for our clients. So our clients in the agri-tech sector cover a broad range from small startups to big international companies. And in the agri-tech sector, we find ourselves coming up with solutions that generally involve some combination of 4 key technologies. So there's a general trend towards more granular data. People these days are interested in finding out about individual plants rather than looking at a field or a farm as a whole. And to do that, you need some level of automation of data gathering. So you'll need machine vision, you'll need artificial intelligence or machine learning to do that. And then once you've gathered that data, you want to do something about it. So that requires robotics and smart automation to deliver that precision agriculture. And automation is nothing new in the farming environment. The farmers have been automating things for hundreds of years. But what we're looking at now is taking that next step and automating the next level of tasks. Part of that automation is often about delivering a precise mixture and a precise amount of fluid at a particular location. It's no good knowing exactly which plant needs the pesticide if you have to deliver it to all of them anyway. So controlling the delivery of fluids, fertilizers or pesticides is an important part of solving agri-tech problems. And then finally, if you've got all that data being gathered by different machines in the field, you need some way of communicating that back to base and then back out to those machines. And doing that in a field environment rather than an office or in a city where there's lots of mobile phone masts, that's particularly challenging and comes with its own set of solutions and problems. So that's the technology. If we look at the ecosystem of the companies and people that are involved in providing one of those products, it always starts with the end user. This is the person who has the problem that needs to be solved. And typically that will be a farmer or a grower. And they engage with a solution provider. The solution provider is the person who sells the solution. And it might be the same person or it might be different to the person who's developed the solution. That's the company that has invented something and has turned it from an idea into reality. And then finally, the fourth piece of the pie is the funder. So typically the end user might want to buy a solution, a service or a product, but they don't want to pay for the development of the whole suite and whole family of products. And that's why you need someone funding. Now, the people we've got here and companies you might meet may cover one or more of these segments. So for example, we've got G's here. They're clearly an end user, but they're big enough that they might develop their own technology, they might supply it to their own farmers, and they might even fund that development. Small robot company, for example, they're clearly technology developer and a solution provider. Not only do they invent the thing and build these robots that they then sell them to the farmers or sell the service to the farmers. But and often the solution provider and the technology developer are the same person. But the reason I've split them is because just to illustrate where Cambridge consultants fall. So we're clearly a technology developer only. So we come into play when you have a solution and you need support in turning your idea or your prototype into a product. We don't sell the product itself. We're not going to take your IP. We're not going to eat your lunch. If you're a solution provider, what we develop for you, you own completely. We don't take royalties in. So that's where we fit. And then a quick sort of scene setting for the discussion we're going to have. I think it's undeniable that agri-tech is facing a variety of challenges at the moment, not just from the pandemic, but increasing political and society pressures. It's getting harder and harder to find labour to do the jobs on the fields, for example, and there's more regulation and desire for increased precision in agriculture. And so the market's there for new solutions. I think people would buy the solutions if they're out there and they are proven to work. And the technology, the individual technology building blocks like robotics, sensing, artificial intelligence, machine vision, those building blocks are there. The new things are coming out of universities. And we've especially in the UK, we've got a large variety of startups that have the ideas, they have the product concepts of how those technology building blocks turn into something useful. But despite all this, actual ready-to-use products that farmers can use today are still quite thin on the ground. So hopefully in the discussion following this, we'll kind of explore some of those barriers and solutions to that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. Now, yes, there's some thought-provoking ideas there, definitely. Right, so let's open the discussion, everyone. So what I'd like to do first is to spend the first half of the discussion identifying the reasons as to why these technologies are thin on the ground, to use Chris's words, and then spend the second half of the session to actually figure out what are the potential solutions, how, in your experience, come around these challenges and got to where you are to be successful. And that's the part where I'd like our listeners to hear, and that's where we're probably going to add quite a lot of value to their time. So let's do it that way. So with that in mind, I'm going to come to you, Rob, first. So please, your views as to, in your experience, why, when there's a clear demand for technologies and products from the end users like yourselves, but they're still thin on the ground. We still have them, but it's still thin on the ground. So I'd like to come to you first as the end user, please.
Thank you very much. So, I think you can look at it from many different ways. I'm looking at it in terms of from the kind of disconnect or the issues that we face. The first thing we think about really is we haven't just got one problem within a sector. We have quite a number of problems, and we have to kind of prioritize what we're focusing on. So when you're talking about number of projects that come to fruition over a time period, you take G's, for example, which is a big proportion of the salad industry, salad sector. We haven't got the resources to be investing in all of our challenges. So we pick the most important ones and drive one challenge. So when you look at a figure of number of projects to completion to final market, then there is a resource issue and a prioritize issue from our end, which you have to consider before doing any of what we're going to be talking about today. I think in terms of some of the issues that you face on that journey is having the level of understanding right the way from the developers, right the way to the final users of exactly what we want, but exactly the challenges you're going to face. So we have the academia, we have the background knowledge on so many areas that will say, yeah, we can do X, and we've done it in a lab or we've done it in controlled conditions. Taking that challenge then out into the field is often a massive hurdle that then adds cost, it adds excessive time to projects, and so it becomes a very long-winded affair. No fault to anybody, but naturally it takes a long time. And that really, in essence, is another issue that you see, is the time that is required. We're in a fast-moving sector, industry, and challenges come and go very, very quickly, and you really have to invest a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of expertise to get these solutions out into the field in the correct timescale, which is another challenge. And like I say, the other issue you often face is, I take us for an example, we can collaborate with a company. We spend 5 years, for example, developing a solution to a problem. Fantastic. Is that solution repeatable to every other farmer within that sector in the UK or in Europe or in the world, actually, to really make it a profitable operation? And that is really complicated on all cropping, all sectors. No two farmers do the same thing. All farmers have different challenges along the route, be it due to location, climate, system, final product you're trying to produce, final marketplace, etc. And all of that really adds complexity into a project that needs so much commitment and so much resource and drive and desire to make it work. And I think that's why so few actually come to fruition as well. And I think, just to finish, I think we're also guilty at times of being too far away from reality. So when I have a problem, yes, fantastic, I would love to have a robot come and solve this problem. But actually, the first step to solving it is maybe making little steps. So not making massive strides, but making those small steps along the journey to get to the end robotic system, if that is the ultimate answer. And I think that's something that the successful projects have done.
Sure. Okay. So you mentioned a few things there. So the resource constraints, and also I think you started saying there's a bit of a disconnect between the technology developer and the end user, like yourself. So, and I saw Ben and Chris nodding away. So Ben, I'll bring you in. So you're one of the visionaries in this space who's trying to make a breakthrough. The things that Rob mentioned, does that resonate with you? And also, what other challenges have you seen, and the reasons as to why we're having this issue?
So yeah, my background, I spent the last 20 years working in user-centered design for all sorts of things, for massive brands, a couple of other startups, hardware and software. And it always amazes me when a new technology or a sort of wave of technology sort of hits a particular industry, that very often the first products are driven by the technologists rather than necessarily driven by the user need. Yeah. So quite often they see a potential need, view it as a problem, and then try and answer that need, and don't necessarily know how that fits within the world of the user, in this case the farmer. So it was absolutely fascinating coming into this world and seeing basically the same thing. That's quite often, particularly if it's driven from academia, because obviously academics are looking at the projects from their own perspective. They're looking at it from their own funding perspective, from how they're resourcing it and stuff. And there is definitely a disconnect and remove from the audience. The second thing I think is really making it pay. So new technologies are expensive. Trying to create something which is cost effective for the end user and allows for benefits to be shown is extremely important. I'm picking up on Rob's point. Ultimately, if we create something which drives small but a significant benefit in one particular area as a starting point, then that gives us that sort of foothold of engagement and being able to work with customers to make it happen. And then the final point, again, which sort of Rob touched on, which is about robustness and reliability. When you're dealing with vehicles that have to work in field all day, every day, on their own, in all sorts of conditions, that is a huge challenge. And the jump from proof of concept or prototype to that level of reliability is a long, arduous task that is just a grind. And it's not helped really by, when you're dealing with hardware, the sort of iterative cycles and the and the costs of and time that it takes to get in the components to be able to move stuff forward. So these are all challenges in that time frame, in that area.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So again, you added a few more things like the liabilities here, which I'm taking notes down, and also the disconnect is clearly there. Now Chris is agreeing, but I want to bring in Dave here. Dave, you're someone who's working in this equation with many people. So you got the government you're working with, the end users, the technology developers like ourselves and Ben. So what have you seen, and what are your views on this as to why it's the technologies are thin on the ground?
Okay, I'm going to come possibly underline some of the comments that both Rob and Ben have made already, but drawing it back to a more global context. We know that global demand for food's increasing. We know that the agri-food sector has one of the most complex and diverse production and supply chain processes. And we've got globally significant regional variation in what we grow, the commodities, the methods of production, and the infrastructural transport systems that feed different territories in the world. Now, that's what makes it actually quite an exciting and challenging space for technology. It's a very much a challenging space. So primary producers, processors, supply chain have got lots of demands, existing demands placed on them, and they're time starved. But from their perspective, what I'm seeing and hearing is the obvious one, which is economic viability of a solution. Does it stack up? Are there environmental benefits to deployment of a solution that are side benefits? How do we engage with all the other competing priorities that are starting to develop, particularly in the advanced economies like land capital preservation, other constraints, biodiversity, all these other things that sit on the side? And I suppose the central focus might be, you would think that the quality and yield and outputs are there, those drivers are there in growing economies where you've got demographic change, you've got larger human populations, rising living standards. And I think for every primary producer across the globe, they always want to seek to better understand and control their own processes and have more control. And that's a route in for many agri-tech solutions. So controlling variation, minimizing inputs, looking at net zero, biodiversity, health, diagnostics, genetics, circular economy, automation, as we talked about, they're drivers and technologies that offer solutions. So that's kind of my feel on how the demand part of it, there's definitely a demand. If we move off to offerings now, so I suppose from the industry sector, there's been a traditional lack of what I call digitization in the sector, the understanding of the people who work in the sector. It's agriculture and agri-food supply chain has worked at the lower end, shall we call it, of the digitization framework. And the other obvious parameters are robustness, resilience in a challenging environment, and return on investment. And there's a fuller understanding of the benefits, including, for example, social benefits, because some of the things that we've worked on in the past, there's been a knock-on social benefit. If you imagine robotic milking, for example, it provides a new lifestyle opportunity for those people that adopt that technology. But there are all significant hurdles to overcome. What I'm encouraged about is the agri-tech ecosystem in the UK. It's building, it's growing. We've got lots of the ecosystem, I'm sure, on this webinar. And we've got an increasing awareness by primary producers in the supply chain of the potential benefits to their business. So I think that the business environment is getting better in the UK. I'll just cite a tiny positive example from a personal perspective. So we got involved in a project. It was challenging, and we did get there. And we've now got a tool that is providing soil mapping across about just under 1 million hectares in the UK, only about 18 months to 2 years after we finished the project. So it showed a very, very fast take up if we got the market positioning right, and we addressed the needs of the end user.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much. Wow, there's a lot of reasons as to why I think this is thin on the ground. So far, in summary, what I've heard is, I may have missed some, but it's the disconnect between the technology developers and the end users. Otherwise, I think, Ben, you made the point, there'll be lot of tech out there looking for solutions if you're not working together, right? So there's that. And then there's the finding appropriate business model. I think that's what Dave was alluding to, that the economic viability, because sometimes it's really difficult to figure out their return on investment. So finding the right business model is another reason. And then the digitization, so the uptake of this in the sector in general has been low. So those can be reasons. Chris, I'd like to come to you again to sort of see if any of those resonates with you, and then maybe add one or two on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That idea of making sure that the solution is not a tech push, it's not a solution trying to find a problem, but instead, you choose whatever technology you can use that really solves the problem that people need. That's a common problem across industries. It's not just an agri-tech thing. It happens, as Ben said, happens across many industries. And in some ways it's natural because, technologies are invented as a technology, and that's the right thing to do at that point. But then you need to find a way of kind of mapping that technology to a good solution to solve. And I think the other thing that I would add is there's a speed to market. It can be a barrier. You might not think of agri-tech as a fast-moving environment. It does not changing as quickly as mobile phone technology. But in some ways that's a bit of an illusion, because it is. The pressures on agri-tech are causing it to change. And B, you've got a cadence set by the seasons. The seasons don't wait for somebody. So if your technology is a couple of months late, or it takes you a few weeks to make a change and get it out again, you might have missed your window for a whole year. So another barrier that you need to be careful of is getting that speed to market right.
Yeah, the seasonal variation, right? I mean, doing research and development, I'm sure Ben can agree that it's hard when it's in normal circumstances, and working with these kind of tight deadlines is even more difficult, right? So to your point, if you miss something this year, that's a whole season, be that 6 months or a year. And that's incredibly difficult to work in that. So no, I didn't think of that. But Ben, have you seen that? I mean, how are you? I mean, is that one of your experiences, like working against these deadlines? Yeah.
Absolutely, and also, so we are working with farmers looking at winter wheat. There is a relatively sort of strict timeline in terms of when you need to be there. One of the things that our Tom robot does is look at emergence mapping, so being able to map the location of the plants as they come up. You've probably got a two-week window to be able to do that from when they start to emerge. So it's a very, very tight window. The other thing that's really sort of allowed or forced us to be sort of responsive to the situation is we've been in a situation where we assumed that we would have invernalization on our crops that we were looking at between early mid-December and probably late January, February. Of the 4 years we've been trialing, only one of those have we had significant invernalization. Because of warming climate. Also last year, 2019, we were hit with the worst autumn and winter rains for 40 years, where a lot of our farmers just couldn't put anything in the ground at all, or had to delay it a long time just because the fields were in a hell of a state. So the climate brings in vagaries alongside this sort of rigid process that farmers have to go through to be able to grow their crops. And it's always a bit of a dance to try and make sure that you can deliver the technologies that you're trying to trial or test or deliver the service, around one very rigid situation and one very changeable situation at the same time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure Chris agrees. It's incredibly difficult to work in those tight deadlines and restrictions. So far, we have covered many things. So the disconnect between the technology developers and the end users, the finding the right business model we talked about and how difficult that can be, working in seasonal variation, that's another one, and also the digitization, the liabilities, resource issues, and all of this. So these are all reasons as to why we think that the technologies are not there, or there's a low barrier to entry. Before I move on, I think there's another one I could maybe bring Dave in here, or maybe Chris, is a lack of skills and capability. I don't know if that is something that that you have seen, Dave, or Ben, or Chris, really. Please, someone comment.
I can drop a quick comment in on that, Saj. I think from my view of the telescope, should we call it, we do have a changing landscape of technology availability for primary producers in the supply chain. We've got a lot of new novel offerings coming through. There are issues with operational issues with multiple solutions, perhaps not talking to each other to the same extent you would get the best benefit, and multiple different agri-tech solutions being deployed on that don't provide a common point of information that they can retrieve. So there's that from the user. There's also, I think, there's a growing understanding that the skills of the primary producer need to be enhanced by the availability to understand, to realize the benefits of any technology. And one thing towards that end I was just going to mention was, I'm encouraged by the recent direction of travel. I think the industry through the Food and Drink Sector Council downwards has understood the professionalization of the industry needs to be enhanced. And I believe that there's a new Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture, a new professional body that's due to come into play, I hope, this year, that will actually provide a focus for that skills development, professional registration, and everything that goes with it as a means to help and assist from the end user perspective on all of the different gamut of different offerings that may appear in the next 3, 5, 10 years or so.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I think I'd just like to add, I think you've also got to remember who you're kind of dealing with as a sector as well. So the farming, if you talk about the agricultural sector and the average age of it's an aging population. So bringing on new technology hasn't been at the forefront of many actual farmers in and around the UK, for instance. I think you also have to remember that even for a large company like ourselves that have specific innovation departments that partner up with technology companies to find solutions, we are dealing in an industry of a just-in-time supply chain with huge demands from our customers, and we are we need to deliver day in, day out, day in, day out. So any technology that's going to be implemented has to be so reliable. It has to be so well tested. It has to have such a good commercial backing and support. We are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, producing lettuces and salads. We're harvesting non-stop around the clock. You have to have that backup for anything, any technology you implement. It has to be absolutely bomb-proof before you take it on board. And that's not just the horticultural sector, that obviously applies to the agricultural sector as well. Anything you invest in and bring on has to almost have proved the test of time for the majority of the industry to take it on. Yes, you've got the 10% innovators that will take it on and drive it, etc. But the other 90% of the marketplace that will actually make your idea fully successful and financially viable and a global success, you are relying on the followers. Yeah. And that will take quite a lot of time, and that mustn't be underestimated. And the cost of a project to get to that point for the followers to adopt it can often be a step too far.
Yeah, and I think I don't think there's a skills shortage so much as sometimes there is a lack of acknowledgement that the skills you need to develop fundamental technology, and the skills you need to take that technology to turn into a prototype, and then the skills you need to turn that prototype into that robust product that works 24/7 with the sport. Those are all different skills. And so, if you're very, very good at one of them, you're probably not very good at the other two. And so acknowledging that just, you know, there needs to be an acknowledgement that your company or the people you employ or the people you partner with needs to change as your product moves through those life cycles.
Right.
So those skills all exist in the UK. We've got great engineering resources, but employing them at the right time is
Right time, yeah.
better.
And applying them to the right sort of project and the application is important, isn't it? So brilliant, guys. There is quite a few reasons as to why. Now, I think I'd like to move on to the solutions. I think this is where we're going to have great discussions around. Okay, we've identified these issues. Again, not to repeat myself, but it's the disconnect, it's the seasonal variation difficulties, it's the finding the right business model, it's the, you know, the lack of skills and capability we just talked about, and all of that. So I'm going to come to you, Dave, first, sort of give a broad sort of view about how have you come, you know, overcome some of those issues that we've just identified. So start with the core development one, if you like.
Yeah, no bother. I think from our perspective, and we, as I say, when we've set up within our business, we've set up a whole range of what we call satellite farms across the UK and beyond, actually internationally. And part of the reason for that investment was to create, we hoped, the early pioneer adopters and provide those people that would take the earlier risk with new technology, to provide that virtuous cycle of refinement in order to get to a robust and reliable solution. So we've used that as part of our pathway to help and assist developers of new technology get to where G's and Rob needs them to be. But I think part of the other challenges across the patch, as well as that understanding of the end users' needs, the farmers' needs, the growers' needs, whatever the commodity has been produced, complete embedded understanding of that, and the time precious element of their businesses, and the relative, we're not in a .com industry, there's not huge margins to be made across the sector. So we've got, any solution has to fit within that framework. And I think Rob's really articulated it far better than I have just earlier. The other challenge, I think, going back to the developer, is a little bit chicken and egg, because they require the investment in their business to develop that breakthrough solution, that evolution of a design or whatever. And sometimes that early stage investment, although the government can help, is difficult to get by. And a lot of time and effort and expense is spent on getting that. And it's great to get an early stage solution. It's great to have a refined solution, but the valley of death in the middle is still a difficult one to overcome. Absolutely. And I think it's really important to understand the customer needs, their constraints and their pain points, and then you can focus on a solution.
Sure. I'm going to bring Ben in. We've been nodding away, agreeing. So Ben, please give us your views on this. And again, how have you gone through overcoming these challenges?
So starting with the sort of understanding of the users, when Sam and I were first introduced together by Professor Simon Blackmore, we were extremely excited by the potential of what was being developed, you know, Harper Adams and Lincoln and other places at that time. But it was really clear that they were academic rather than, you know, really sort of user focused. So the first thing that we did was start engaging with farmers. So as I say, my background is in user experience, and I'm putting together a sort of qualitative research questionnaire that then Sam took out to speak to farmers. And, you know, talking to farmers, you know, is not something that you can sort of wrap up in an hour. You have to understand their situation. You have to get, you know, sort of under the skin of their problems and really, you know, sort of delve into it. So we spoke to 50 farmers, but it took 6 months of, you know, Sam traveling out, you know, sitting next to the Arga, patting the dog, having a good chat, to be able to understand what was going on.
So did you say 50 farmers?
50.
Did you say 50?
Okay. Yeah, to start with. We've done that research, the same piece of research now with over 100, and we sort of repeat that on a regular basis. And I think that having that range is really important. If you work with one farmer, you get one farmer's view. And as Rob was saying, you know, people farm differently and have different views on what happens on the land. And, you know, even sort of different environments, different soils, you know, give a different opinion. So it's important to get a range. Also, if you start working with a particular farmer or group of farmers, you get confirmation bias because they start engaging with you and sort of switching on and enjoying what you're doing, which is terrific, but it doesn't help if you're trying to understand a broader picture. So you need to reach out to, again, to sort of new people to make sure that the information that you've got is important.
Sure.
But on the perspective of skills, I think that, yes, there are people in the UK who have engineering skills, skills in developing neural networks, skills who, in all these sort of areas. But farming is not industrial, is not an industrial process. And there aren't people who have experience of taking a agricultural robotics service to market yet that you can go out and employ and find to bring into what you're doing. So you really need to be quite sort of clever in terms of engaging with people from industries that are close or just sort of the right mindsets. And it's a challenge getting the right people on board. And as Chris was saying, your needs change as you grow. As you move towards the requirement for, moving away from pure innovation towards building it, you have to bring in people who understand that and can make that happen.
Understand that.
So, but it's, it's really exciting to do it because, we found that, we're very vision based, and the people who come to us, and the vast majority of people who we hired have come to us. The people who come to us are the people who believe in the vision and want to make it happen. Yeah. And we've been extremely lucky with the people that we've been able to recruit and where they've come from. When you get approached from somebody from DeepMind saying that they want to help out, it's astonishing. Similarly, sort of people from Formula One saying that they want to help out because, they've suddenly realized how they want to do good. And that is a very exciting situation to be in, to be that sort of hub and center of a lot of people's sort of hopes and dreams about the future.
Yep. Thanks, Ben. Chris, I want to bring you in next. So we talked about this working against this seasonal variation. So I'm sure you've come across this. You worked with many clients who had that sort of tight deadlines. What are the things that you did to sort of overcome this, and how did you go, went about it?
Yeah, it's interesting what Ben said about getting people from sort of adjacent industries, and I think that's something, because we work across lots of different ones. It's absolutely true that you can learn lessons from other industries that have some similar and some different characteristics. So, for example, one of the projects that we did recently, we worked on the government's ventilator challenge, where we developed a fully functioning ventilator in about 6 weeks. Almost from a blank sheet of paper, and that would have normally taken 6 years. And so the medical device market is quite different from the agri-tech market, but some of the challenges are very similar. We had to accelerate a development, and we had to make sure we weren't going down blind alleys where the engineers came up with a fantastic idea which was really technically exciting but wouldn't work in the hospital environment. And it is exactly the same thing that the agri-tech sector is facing. And the way that we solved that problem was, it's not rocket science. We just made sure we were talking to the end users throughout the development. So those crazy ideas had a lifetime of about 1 day, because every day we would talk to a surgeon or somebody who would use the ventilator, and as Ben said, a range of people. So you're not just getting one person's opinion. And they would very quickly be able to say, well, that's all very well, but we'll never use it like that. That just won't work at how we want to use it. And by doing that, by having that conversation frequently and regularly, we made sure that the solution that we came up with was one that could be used. And key to being able to do that is having people who can speak both the languages. It's really important to have a breadth of experience, so that effectively the engineering team can understand what the farmer or the grower, the end user, is saying to them. And if you don't have someone that is, has some experience in one side and some experience in the other, that can cross those boundaries, is experienced in both the the agricultural side and the engineering side, then those two people won't be able to talk to each other because the language is just so different.
Great, thank you very much. Now, in the last sort of couple of minutes we've got left in the discussion before I move into the Q&As, there's quite a few questions coming through, so keep them coming. I'll pose them to our panelists very soon. So I think, again, I want to touch on that seasonal variation. Rob, I want to come to you. So how have you done projects when you had this seasonal issue to deal with and tight deadlines?
I think it boils down to very articulate planning, meticulous planning, apologies. So you hit those windows. So everybody is aware of this is a critical period and you're all working towards that. We've also tried to expand our projects, not just in the UK, but also then our sister company, or the same company, G's España. So we then have a 12-month production cycle, so that if we're developing something on lettuce, we can develop it in the UK in the summer and then develop it out in Spain over the winter period. So we get a lot more cycles and a lot more repeats to test that technology, for instance. So that's how we can get around it. But obviously that can also be a massive challenge to some projects, because it needs resource and slight complication of moving a project to Spain as opposed to being in the UK. So there is complications with that, but that's what we try and do. And I think the key thing is setting out at the beginning of any project, these are our key points where we have to hit, and if we don't, we will fail. Ultimately, they are critical points in the project, and as long as you're aware of them and resource things correctly, bar bizarre acts of God or so, you know what I mean, something like that, then obviously you can't do a lot about that. But it's in the planning. For me, it is in the planning and having that level of understanding from all involved at the outset. And often there isn't a plan B. There can be. You can use technology, you can use labs, you can use etc., but you can't beat the real thing, which is out in that real environment, doing your testing, doing your trials and developing.
Yeah. Chris, where does simulated environments and synthetic data play in here? I know you've done sort of work around this. Can that help in these sort of situations when you've got this massive time pressure?
It can. I mean, it's only ever going to be part of the picture, because, as you say, the real world is really important. And something we've seen frequently is you take a machine vision application, and you've got a camera that's looking at some crops and distinguishing weeds from crops, and it works perfectly in your lab, which is brightly lit, with the examples of crops you've got, and then you take it out into the field and suddenly it doesn't work because it's cloudy. So simulation has got a part to play. I think one of the key technologies is understanding how you simulate those imperfections. So actually modeling the lack of light and the noise that your sensor, because your sensor's not going to get a perfect picture. There's going to be dust and dirt. Making sure it works in the rain. There are techniques that you can use to model those and build that into your simulation, but you've got to do that. And you've got to be aware that you need to do that. So the simulation does have a part to play. It definitely allows you to explore lots and lots of different scenarios much faster and much more cheaply than you could by doing it in the real world. But it's not going to be a substitute for doing it in the real world. So typically the approach you use is you do lots of simulations to kind of get, okay, maybe this concept will work. Then you go to the real world and you see how it performs in the real world. And then you might come back into simulation. You say, oh, okay, now we need to include in our simulation the effects of rain, and we'll put those in, and then go around that cycle again.
Ben, does that resonate with you? For the first question, and the second one is actually I want to ask you about how do you work out the right business model? I think that I can see some questions in the chat. Where do you start with figuring out the right business model?
So first, I mean, I'd just like to, I think that Rob and Chris are absolutely right. There's only so much you can do in the lab, and you got to get the wheels muddy, and you've got to go out there and you've got to experience the rain and all the rest of it to really learn the lessons. Also, you've got to work with the right partners. So we couldn't do everything on our own. We've got quite a broad scope. So we work with some fantastic partners to be able to deliver sort of core pieces of technology, like working with photonics on cameras and stuff like that to make sure that we bring that understanding in. I'm sorry, what was the second question? Oh, business model.
Business model.
So I mean, we came up with the idea of sort of a service model, and it's really heartening to see that, you know, a lot of other farmers another robotics companies are looking at the same thing, and that was completely driven by the farmers. Ultimately, you know, cereal farmers, arable farmers work on very tight margins. They have to buy expensive kit, but that kit has to work for years to be able to get that money back. They are not going to invest in a new system, a new technology, unless there is a, you know, proven return. So, you know, smoothing that sort of path to engagement and making it as easy as possible to come on board is absolutely key. So that's why we work on a per hectare basis to make sure it works. It's also really, really important that when you go into it, you understand the costs of the situation now. Because if you're designing something which can inherently never get down to the right cost levels, then you're in trouble. And if you don't start trying to work out your, you know, your unit costs and all the rest of it early in the process, then you will find yourself in a dead end. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we've got 5 minutes, and I'd like to take a few questions. Dave, there's one came through. I think you're the best place to answer this. Do we have the capability to deliver technologies like these from the UK alone? Can we deliver the complete proposition?
If the pretext of the question was for international take-up, I think there's layers of answers to that. I think one of the answers to that is that we frequently get approached by what we call the large incumbent multinational companies that supply goods and services into the agricultural sector. They're always looking for the new innovative technologies that they can actually service and support. So they have this embedded service. The crucial elements of actually robustness and reliability is to, once you've delivered something, it continues to be delivered. Now, if you look at a service model provision, that's slightly different. But if you're actually procuring and using as an end customer, you're reliant upon that service, that other service provision of the equipment or the technology. So in terms of global, yes, from the UK, I would suggest that one way to do that is through partnerships with larger organizations that can have that infrastructure embedded already. And it might allow solutions from the UK to grow into an international market quicker. If the pretext is the UK good enough to supply solutions for the UK, the answer to that, obviously, from my point is yes. There are loads of really very good innovators with good solutions in the UK that are identifying problems. There are hiccups, shall we call it, in getting those solutions to market and the way that and all the challenges that we've previously discussed. So I think if it's a global question, I think there are routes and mechanisms to that. One aside from that is if you're looking at a technology that's not ground deployed, for example, earth observation technologies, which there are a few developing, it's much easier to get an addressable market and deliver a service to an addressable market elsewhere, providing that you can actually support that with reliable and quantitative advice or information at the local level. So that's my sort of hybrid answer to a question. I'm not quite sure that it's the right answer.
Oh, no, that's fine. Chris, there's one for you here, which is, how do we, and maybe Rob as well can probably weigh in on this in the 3 minutes we've got. How do we navigate through some of these complex technology elements, such as like AI, ML, and really know what makes sense for my development?
Sure, it's a good question. I think, or just taking AI for example, a few years ago, I think people thought AI was a solution to everything, and you know, whatever the question was, that was the answer. And we've moved on since then, and it is one of the tools in the toolbox that can be used to solve a particular problem when it's the right answer. You know, focusing on that idea of it's not about tech push, it's about solving problems. But I think the key way of navigating through that problem is to take, you know, a systems view. You know, we need to solve a problem, and and all aspects of that problem need to be solved. So, you know, as much about the detecting the plant, it's also about delivering the pesticide or treatment. It's about then designing that in a way that's easy to manufacture and easy to support and easy to diagnose. So the way to navigate through these technologies is to kind of, take an overview, work out which technologies need innovation, which technologies need to be kind of developed, and which ones can be bought off the shelf. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel because you can reuse something that already exists. So, focusing new innovation at the right place, buying off the shelf when you can, making sure the whole system works together as a,
right,
as a whole, that in a way that not only delivers the technological effect that you need, but also is commercially viable because it's easy to manufacture and easy to support.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. In the last minute we've got one quick answer I want to squeeze in. Does the adoption and understand of the adoption and understand of the technology means we need more education for the sector?
I think if I could just touch on that one, I think education, I don't think we need education per se. I think we need strength in depth and diversity within companies. So for us, the reason we innovate is because we're structured in a way that allows us to innovate. So we will start we will start with our growers who will highlight problems. We have an innovation team that then assess what's out there, choose the correct partners, and we then employ a mixture of postgrads, farmers, technologists, scientists, whatever is required for that project, and get everybody of the right and multiple skill sets within that project base. So I don't think it's education per se. I think it was touched on earlier. I think it's having the right characteristics within that team rather than having a lack of understanding. We'd have to remember a lot of this is pioneering stuff. It's going to come from a very small information seed, if you like, and it's growing that seed, it's growing that potential, and you only do that by having the right people in the room. Yeah,
thank you very much. I'm afraid that's the time we've got. We've got loads more questions in the Q&A, so what I'm going to do is actually try and answer some of these questions and get it back to you. But just to close off, many thanks, panelists, very much for taking the time off, and also behind the scenes who everybody helped us to put this event in place. And it's very difficult to do it in normal times, yet alone the unprecedented times that we are living in. So many thanks for them. But the 2 points that actually stood out for me is the importance of the core development approach, and also the finding the right business model from the beginning. I mean, if you don't have those two, then actually the product's not going to be successful. So that's the 2 things that sort of came out for me. But many thanks again for joining us. There's loads more questions here coming through still. Much appreciated your time. So thank you very much. And if you've got any other questions for any of the panelists or for myself, please get in touch and we can answer and get back to you and have a discussion around that.